The air in Ashworth Manor lay thick and heavy, not just with the scent of damp stone and wood smoke, but with a pervasive dread that had little to do with the encroaching autumn chill. Outside, the English countryside was a land torn asunder, the king's men and the parliamentarian forces clashing like angry thunderclouds. Inside, Lady Eleanor Waller felt the war not in the roar of cannon, but in the chilling silence of her once bustling home, and the gnawing uncertainty for her husband, Sir Thomas, who rode with the royalist cause. Since the master's departure 6 months prior, a new inhabitant had taken up residence within the manor walls, a presence unseen, yet undeniably felt. It began subtly, a faint, mournful sigh heard on the landing when no one was there, the inexplicable scurrying of rats in walls where no rats dwelled, a sudden, icy draught in rooms with sealed shutters. The servants, already skittish from tales of skirmishes and witch-finders, whispered of a restless spirit, a soul unable to find peace in these troubled times. Eleanor, a woman of stern Puritan conviction, initially dismissed their fears as papist nonsense and the anxieties of war-racked minds. Had not their learned ministers preached against the very idea of wandering souls? Such apparitions, if they occurred, were surely the work of the devil, seeking to tempt and mislead God-fearing folk. She clung to this belief, like a drowning woman to driftwood, her faith a shield against the encroaching terror. Yet, the disturbances escalated. A heavy oak door, barred from the inside, was found ajar at dawn. Objects moved in locked rooms. A silver locket, a gift from Thomas, vanished from her dressing table only to reappear days later on the cold hearthstone, its surface strangely tarnished as if by frost. One evening, while sitting by the fire, Eleanor heard a distinct, dragging footstep overhead, followed by a heavy thud, as if something substantial had fallen. Rushing upstairs with the trembling candle, she found nothing out of place. The servants grew more fearful, some refusing to enter certain parts of the house after dusk. Eleanor, despite her outward resolve, felt a prickle of unease that no amount of prayer seemed to fully quell. She began to sleep poorly, her dreams filled with swirling mists and the distant, sorrowful cry that now seemed to echo in the very stones of Ashworth. The turning point came on a blustery November night. A storm raged outside, mirroring the tempest in Eleanor's soul. She sat alone in the great hall, the wind howling around the ancient house. A log in the fireplace crackled and spat, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and lengthen. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted. The air grew still, unnaturally so, and the howling of the wind outside seemed to recede, replaced by a low, guttural moan that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. Then, in the flickering firelight near the opposite wall, a figure began to coalesce. It was insubstantial at first, like a wisp of smoke given form, but it slowly solidified into the vague outline of a man. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Her first instinct, as her faith dictated, was to cry out against the demonic lie. But, as the figure became clearer, a gasp escaped her lips. It wore the doublet and breeches of a gentleman, though the fabric seemed worn and faded, clinging to a form that was not quite solid. But it was the face, or the absence of one, that truly chilled her. Where features should have been, there was only a swirling, grey mist. Yet, she felt an overwhelming sense of despair emanating from it, a sorrow so profound it was a physical weight in the room. The figure raised a spectral hand, pointing a translucent finger towards the large portrait of Sir Thomas that hung above the hearth. Then, a sound, like dry leaves skittering across a cold flagstone floor, filled the silence. It was a whisper, devoid of warmth, yet carrying a chilling clarity. Worcester. Fallen. The figure lingered for another heartbeat, the sorrowful aura intensifying before dissipating as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the renewed howl of the wind and the frantic beating of Eleanor's heart. Worcester. Eleanor knew of the recent, decisive victory for Parliament there. Had Thomas been present? Had he fallen? The whispered word, coupled with the spectral figure pointing to his portrait, delivered a blow more devastating than any cannonball. Her Puritan beliefs warred with the undeniable reality of what she had witnessed. Was this a demonic deception, preying on her fears for Thomas? Or was it, as the servants believed, a soul returned? If so, was it Thomas's? The grey, featureless face offered no confirmation, only that profound, aching sorrow. Days later, a lone rider, mud-splattered and weary, arrived at Ashworth Manor bearing a letter. It was from a captain in Thomas's regiment, detailing the brutal fighting at Worcester and listing the names of the fallen. Sir Thomas Waller was among them. Eleanor read the letter, her hands trembling, the words blurring through her tears. The ghost's message had been grimly accurate. But who, or what, had delivered it? The haunting did not cease with the confirmation of Thomas's death. The sighs, the cold draughts, the moving objects continued, a constant, chilling reminder of the veil between worlds being thinner than she had ever imagined. Eleanor never saw the full figure again, only fleeting glimpses of movement in her periphery. The sense of being watched by something sorrowful and lost. She never spoke of the figure's appearance to the servants, fearing they would believe her losing her wits, or, worse, engaging with dark forces. She was a woman of faith, yet the spectral messenger had shaken the very foundations of her understanding of life and death, of heaven and hell. In the long, dark nights that followed, as the war raged on and Ashworth Manor stood as a silent sentinel to loss, Eleanor would sometimes sit by the dying fire, listening to the old house creak and groan, and she would wonder if the sorrow she felt was entirely her own, or if a part of it belonged to the restless soul that still lingered within her walls, forever bound to the tragic field of Worcester and the war that had claimed its life. It was a question for which her faith offered no easy answer, leaving her alone with her grief and the chilling presence of the ghost of a faceless man.